that's consumed in Europe. So there were no coffee pots or teapots, so the Spaniards came up with the chocolatera, which is this pot, which is used for serving chocolate, but also for preparing it. And since chocolate needed to be, it's fatty, so you have to mix it very well, they came up with the first known immersion blender, cordless immersion blender, which is this one. It's called the molinillo. This one comes from Mexico, but every country in Latin America has a different style. And you simply froth the chocolate like this. Now, the Spaniards kept chocolate as their own little secret. They didn't want to share it with any other nation. Why? Because due to the biological clash, the indigenous population of Central America really went down. In less than a century, they were practically wiped out. There were a few left, but then there wasn't enough labor. So during the entire 1500s, chocolate is just a privilege of the Spaniards. By the end of the 1500s, the population of Latin America, or of the Spanish Empire in America, starts recovering. Not because the Indians started reproducing more, but because blacks were brought from Africa to replace the labor force here. So by 1600, Spain is willing to share their little secret with somebody else. And who is that somebody else? Believe it or not, the French. The question is, why the French? My family's French, so I can joke about them. I have a license. And why the French? Well, because political alliances at that time were always sealed with a marriage. So the Princess of Spain, whose name was Anne of Austria, because she belonged to the Habsburg family that originated in Austria. So Anne of Austria, who was 15 years old, is given in matrimony to King Louis XIII of France, who was also 15 years old at the time. They get married. It's not a marriage of love, so she goes very well prepared for what's going to be a miserable marriage. And she takes the love drug as a substitute for real love.
10 servants specialized in making chocolate for her at her court. Why so many people? Because chocolate from indigenous times was always prepared
by
hand on a stone metate that was warmed up. And then these beans are just ground and ground and ground, and the friction and the heat turns it into a paste. Kind of like peanut butter if you were to grind up peanut butter, because these beans have 50% cocoa butter. That's as part of their makeup. So it takes quite a bit of work.
Now, if you think that this is a great workout, you're totally wrong. You don't get great biceps or triceps from doing this. What you get is tendinitis and bursitis. So don't do this at home. It was a lot of work. So in the French court, people go crazy, and they start consuming chocolate a lot. By the way, Anne of Austria was the Queen of France at the time of the Three Musketeers, just to get us in a timeline. And eventually she gets pregnant, and she has a little son whose name was, like his father, Louis. So he becomes Louis XIV, the Roi Soleil, the Sun King. His father dies when Louis is about 5 years old, so just imagine the kind of brat that he must have been. He loved spending money, and nobody could say no to him. So Louis, during the first years, he's not going to be king because he's a little boy. So the cardinal and his mother will be regents of France. And then when he turns 20, he says, well, I'm ready to be king. And then the French go like, now we're in trouble. This king loves to spend money. He loves to party, he loves to eat well, he loves to build palaces. He would build Versailles eventually. And then they say, well, now we're in trouble. Where do we get money to please him? A solution would be to declare war on your neighbors, but that's kind of risky, because you can lose the war. So, fortunately for the French, they had a great finance minister whose name was Jean Colbert. And Jean Colbert comes up with the idea that in order to improve the economy of France, what they must do is, first of all, to help the middle class, which is very dynamic, to improve the quality and the efficiency of production. So, and second, to find new markets where they can find raw materials and where they can place French goods. And they start sending their beautifully decorated, because there was a ministry specialized in decorating ships, very French, and they start sending them all over the world to, and that's how we get into Louisiana and into the Caribbean and also into Africa and Asia. And from these travels, they're going to bring a lot of raw materials. From the Caribbean, they're going to bring sugar and tobacco. Remember, this is the time of rapé, to snuff. What else do they bring? They bring a lot of sugar and rum. And they're also going to bring from Africa ebony, and from Asia they're going to bring China. Okay, remember, if you go to palaces in Europe from this period, all the vases are made in Chinese porcelain, and many times decorated in blue and white.
Okay, but what does all this have to do with chocolate?
Nothing. let me show off. It's so difficult. Such a low self-esteem, and he. Anyway, why China and silk? And this is very important, because that's the reason that we drink chocolate with a little saucer, and coffee and tea as well, underneath. Because this was a privilege of the nobility. And the nobility would drink in porcelain cups, but they were wearing silk dresses. And a spot of chocolate or coffee or tea on a silk dress, when there was no dry cleaning, was a catastrophe. So they start drinking with these little stupid saucers. So, but up to this point, we're talking about chocolate only as a drink. When does chocolate take the leap into becoming a confection? Well, not until very late. Most of the history of chocolate has been the history of a drink. In the 19th century, in the 1800s, the Europeans start transforming chocolate into something else. Remember, as George was saying, that it was ground and it would melt, and then at room temperature, chocolate solidifies. So they used to make like these big Hershey Kisses, which were made of chocolate. Sometimes they would add sugar, cinnamon, vanilla, whatever spices they wanted to. And then this they would grate into the chocolatera. And that was the way that it was prepared. Oh, by the way, yes. This is from the time of Louis XIV. This is the French chocolatier. Remember, see, in French it even sounds nicer. And, you know, the French always have to improve things, even when they don't need to be improved. And even when improving them makes them somewhat worse. But it's pretty. I can tell you, these French are just amazing. The chocolate continues to be a drink, and then in Holland and in France they start mechanizing the process, because they needed to make it cheaper too and more efficient. There was a great demand, so instead of doing this, they came up with a machine that was called a mélangeur, which had rollers, and the whole kettle that had the bottom of the kettle was made of stone, would spin, and but then they would throw in the cacao nibs, which is this, and after a couple of hours, it was already turned into a paste, and then they would take it and make it into little cakes.
The thing is that those cakes, which were solid, still had a lot of grittiness to it, because the mélangeur never really made the particle size of those cocoa beans and the sugar, didn't reduce them to a size that was really palatable. The big change happened in Switzerland.
In 1879, quite late. In 1879, a man whose name I'm sure you've heard, Rudolf Lindt, comes up with a new invention, which is similar. It's a roller, it's a metate. It's the same stone, but mechanized. So they're going to make a box, and inside the box there's going to be a concave granite bottom, and then a roller made of stone as well, which goes back and forth, and it's moved by a water wheel. This machine is very efficient, but it's the same as the mélangeur. The difference is Rudolf Lindt makes a mistake. Can you explain it?
Rudolf Lindt, well, he was a young man. He was about 24 when he made this mistake. They say that he was leaving on Friday his little factory, and he forgot the machine. Maybe he had a hot date and he was really looking for the weekend. But on Monday he comes back and the machine has been working for 48 hours straight. Now this could have been a big catastrophe. He had no idea what had happened. It's a lot of money in this machine, so he goes and he tastes it. He never had chocolate been so silky smooth. The particle size, because of the amount of time going back and forth and being kneaded, really got that texture that we really love about Swiss chocolate. And thus, Swiss chocolate is born. The Swiss become known for this finesse, this wonderful mouthfeel, that then gives birth to lots of different inventions with chocolate, lots of different kinds of chocolates. But first, we wanted to give you a taste of what that chocolate from Rudolf Lindt might have tasted like. We're giving you a sample of our dark chocolate, which is a flat, dark square on the bottom left of your tray. Now before you put it in your mouth, I wanted you to try chocolate with all of your senses. So first go ahead and